of the internationals. We'll also take a look at some of the fallout from the French game as well. But we'll start with the Edinburgh game at the weekend. And I know, Tom, we've mentioned about how, this has kind of been basically a procession of a season for Munster, insofar as we've known from a while out that they've been, fairly secure in looking to get the top spot to play Leinster in a Pro 14 final. But, 10 points the gap down to Connacht at the moment with 5 games left, I think. I suppose we do just want to keep tipping away, keep momentum going up, and a win over Edinburgh, who are I think in 5th on 19 points. Munster should have enough to go there and get a win.
They should do. You look at the team selected, and there's a lot of quality there. Good to see Andrew Conway back. Chris Farrell and Damien Delende is our first choice midfield, really, when you look at what Munster typically tend to select for the big games. And then it just comes down to whether or not they have the ability against an Edinburgh side who are missing a few of their top guys, but there's some quality there as well. I have a feeling this could be relatively tight, but the rewards for Munster are clear. You get a win here, and all of a sudden, with 4 games left, Munster are 3 clear wins ahead of their competitors, with a chance to play Cardiff Blues after this. There's a chance for Munster here to nail down that spot in the Pro 14 final relatively early, which is ideal. You look at what you want when you're in a race like this. When it's tight at the top, the teams below you can really pressure you. But when you've got that space, you can actually pressure them and pressure their results. I think Munster are in a good spot at the moment. And with this team selected pretty strong, I think there's a really good opportunity to, make a big step towards that final. Whatever happens there, happens. But I think that this is a really big opportunity.
I suppose, Ronan, if you're in Edinburgh's shoes and you're so far adrift, what kind of motivation, I suppose, can you really serve up? I mean, for the teams who are that far off of which is basically everybody bar, Ulster, Leinster, Munster, and to some extent Connacht, it's very hard to find motivation for the rest of the season. It's pretty much, they're automatically looking down the line to 2022 and hopefully a better chance to have a more meaningful competition.
Yeah, it is very true, and I think as we kind of spoke about earlier, before we came online here, it was just a case of how this kind of league structure is going to leave these teams here in the middle without much to play for, really. Like, I think we're going to expect a Munster and Leinster final, which will leave the likes of Edinburgh kind of in limbo as to where the season's going to go. But you can have no doubts, like, there's a lot of guys here in this team who will want to impress their coaches. These teams have their own targets and their own objectives in the season. They'll want to put a lot of things right that they've perhaps could have improved on early in the season. They haven't enjoyed as good a form in the Pro 14 this season as they had last season, and as well, like, people are going to be in this team, want to be pushing for Scotland call-ups and etc. So they'll have plenty to play for. It will be a tough game for them. Munster have put out a very strong team here, and I think with the likes of Craig Casey and Andrew Conway in there, it could be get tough for Edinburgh. But again, Munster will have to be sharp. We saw in Italy a couple of weeks ago that, like, if Munster aren't firing all cylinders, they can become more hard work than it really needs to be. So it'll be an interesting match, but I think both teams will have enough kind of encouragement, enough reason to fight tooth and nail.
Tom, great to see Andrew Conway back, but also great to see Craig Casey and some valuable game time minutes being clocked up here, especially considering he didn't get on the field last week, which was a bit of a head scratcher. But look, a good 90 minutes here, and you just get that feeling that he is inching his way closer to being the impact 9 off the bench that Ireland want and Ireland badly need.
Yeah, look, I think you look at him last week, and without looking to try and second guess what a fella's thinking, you kind of got the impression that that's a guy now who will want to play for Munster at the weekend coming, and he got the selection, of course, which you would expect given his quality. It's a big game for him too. I think he wants to show here that he probably should have been on that field for the last 10 or 15 minutes last week, and he can kind of do that here, controlling the game, doing the kind of qualities that we've seen him over the years with his, over the last 2 years, even with just his pace in the ball, his good decision making, and that kind of stuff. It kind of, will make it kind of a little bit more clear that he's a guy who needs to be selected and played for that Italy game. For a lot of guys here, like a guy like an Andrew Conway, for a Chris Farrell, as Ronan said there with regards to the Edinburgh players for Scotland, I think there's lots of guys here for Munster as well who kind of want to put their hand up and go, look, because Gavin Coombs, for example, he was a guy who was in that wider Irish squad. he was let go, I think, a week or two ago. This is a big game for him too now to go, well, look, I'm a fella who needs to be considered as well for this back row spot long term, and he'll do it by performing in a tough game here against a pretty big Edinburgh back row. You look at Crosby, you look at William Mata, you look at Nick Haining, big physical players. There's a big opportunity for Gavin Coombs here.
I suppose, Tom, the like I said to Ronan there earlier, the motivation for this Edinburgh side, I mean, I can't get my head. To me, like, even from when my playing days, when you do, I know it's different when you get out onto the pitch and game time is game time, but it is hard for teams at the moment, especially you look at the atmosphere on the games, no fans. It is a bit of a slog, but I suppose, look, for the integrity of the competition, we just have to forge ahead with it. But you kind of long for the days where there's a scrap for the top three, where there's maybe the teams in fourth and fifth position are a couple of wins away from nailing down an away quarter final. All these things added to the competition. I suppose just a sign of the times of where we are and what we've had to kind of just grin and bear for the moment. But I, for one, can't wait to get back to those kind of scenarios.
I think everybody involved with the league wants to have those tighter games. Like, you look over the last 2 seasons in particular, with COVID, which is unavoidable, and the World Cup this season before, and then COVID, there's been a lot of disruption in the Pro 14. We haven't really seen the kind of top team on top team league action, it seems like, for a number of years now, where it seems like we're either in the middle of a test window, or in the direct aftermath of a test window, or in the aftermath of a Champions Cup window. So it just seems like the Pro 14 has always had these weird weeks where the very best players aren't being selected, which you can understand that not always that can happen. Even if you were to guarantee, to play it every week, it doesn't happen in the Gallagher Premiership. It wouldn't happen in the Pro 14. But you look at the amount of high quality games with top teams, we haven't really seen it all that much in the last 2 years because just circumstances just haven't allowed. I think that plays a part. You look at the size of the squad that Ulster have, that Munster have, that Leinster certainly have, and you could say with Connacht that there would be a level above some of the other clubs in the league as well. That depth really plays a part, and this is a league that it punishes you if you don't have depth. And you look at Edinburgh, Glasgow, all the other teams really have had pretty average seasons so far compared to the Irish provinces because they just don't have that depth. And any kind of injury at all, and you're down to hugely inexperienced players, which, look, we like seeing inexperienced players. It's, for the casual fan, for the, even for the ability of a team to win a game, that sometimes can play a part in results. Strength of our squads compared to the others. And this weekend, I think, is probably as strong as Edinburgh have been able to be during a test window for a while. You look at some of the guys they've got back, like Van der Vault, Gilchrist. They're missing, guys like Magnus Bradbury, Blair Kinghorn probably would have featured here, except he's got a wrist injury. And you look at some of the other guys that they're missing, but you look at Bill Matas there, Nick Haining, Gilchrist, Pierre Schumann. They've got, I think, a guy Venter on the bench, a new signing from the Cheetahs, good player too. This will be a tough enough assignment for Munster, but I think they should have the quality to get the win here.
Yeah, you'd imagine so. And Ronan, I suppose, look, Tom mentioned depth, and that lack of depth is something that has hurt Munster in previous seasons as they've kind of, strived to get that, home semi-final and avoid Leinster in a semi-final.
Yeah, it is. And I guess this season, the great thing has been, it's been spoken about a lot, is the amount of youth that has come through this Munster team. So I suppose in times like these, then, Craig Casey was called into the Irish camp, but there's a whole lot more talent other than that. Like, you see Healy's there as well. Shane Daly was involved. He'll be playing this weekend as well. And there's plenty of good talent there, including Coombs, as Tom mentioned, the back row, who can have like a huge impact in the game, like the one that is coming up on Saturday evening. So I think Munster in quite a decent place. De Lende in centre as well, having that kind of experience of a South African there is just a brilliant weapon to have in this time of the season, especially when the Six Nations is on. So I think, Munster probably improves that way this season compared to previous years, because it has been a problem in the past. But now you just see it, like, there's a lot of young guys there, and the great thing is, if you aren't performing, if you are kind of older guy in the squad. Maybe if Hanrahan isn't performing, for example, if Chris Cloutier or someone isn't performing, there's going to be young lads there kind of putting pressure on them. And if they're not up to speed, then we have a fairly decent squad who the following week can step in, put them under pressure, and the competition, the squad can just push on everyone, improve everyone. And hopefully now we will see in the next month or so, while the Six Nations is on, that actually this Munster squad is well rounded. We have loads of young guys who can step in. We have international quality guys who are there as well, who'll be well able to make an impression. And as Tom mentioned, it will be fascinating to see Chris Farrell in particular, because we haven't seen much for him in the last while, because obviously he hasn't been playing in the Irish first team. And I think he's a player who was in brilliant form this season, and he'll be, another kind of guy looking to impress against Edinburgh. On another point I kind of picked up on as well was just with the hooker, I think say just to give an example of the strength that we do have, is like Kevin O'Byrne isn't starting this week, Niall Scannell is, and like O'Byrne has possibly been one of Munster's very best players this season. So if we're in a position while Six Nations is on where like someone like him isn't starting, I think that's a pretty positive place to be.
Tom, we also saw during the week, as Ronan mentioned, with the depth and some of the young players, contract extensions at Munster. Always nice to get that kind of business tied down before we start heading into the latter end of the season, and it gives coaches a chance to plan as well. If they don't get certain contracts over the line, it allows them to start identifying places where they need to replace bodies a bit sooner and gives them that bit more time. But I think Munster have always kind of went about doing their business as early as possible in the season, and that's good to see too. And again, great to see some of the young guys getting deals. Craig Casey, 2-year deal. Keith Earls, of course, another 1-year contract. Just good business out of Munster.
Yeah, and you look at Shane Daly, Calvin Nash, these are guys who you want to see getting signed on. It's important as well for Munster to kind of keep the depth in the areas that they're kind of looking to, I suppose, to build more depth. I see that, like, I think you look at Rory Scannell on a 2-year deal, Niall Scannell on a 2-year deal. These are good value signings. Like you look at these guys coming in, they're experienced players, plenty of experience from Munster at provincial level. Niall Scannell has a fair bit of international experience at this stage too. You look at these guys and like you can see where I think you might look in a few years, maybe even over the next couple of months, over Jack Crowley, Ben Healy and Jake Flannery. I think Johan van Graan this week in the press conference was very good in explaining the kind of progress that they're looking to do with these players in that position, where we're unsure about JJ Hanrahan's contract status yet. We know that Joey Carberry will be on for the next year at least. So, and plus the injury thing has to be worked out too. But we know that Jack Crowley, from what we've seen him playing A rugby this year, has been run at 12. We see Jake Flannery tried at 12 again against the Connacht Eagles last week as well. Can play fullback too. I think that these guys' versatility, and I think a kind of a general need in the game anyway, to kind of build up more handlers, more guys who are capable of stepping in at first receiver effectively, and playing that kind of creative role. That's something I think in the game long term, I think Munster will look to try and transition to. When you look at the talent that's coming through, Ben Healy, Jake Crowley, Jake Flannery are all really highly talented young players. And for me, there's no reason why all three of them can't actually play together. And I think that's something that over the next couple of years, where you can play them next to a Rory Scannell at 10 and mix it around a little bit. I think that these guys are people who Munster in particular, I think, have very concrete plans for over the next couple of years. Contracts have to be announced for these players yet, of course, but I would be very surprised if all three of them aren't playing the rugby at Munster next year.
Okay, Tom, I suppose time to get off that fence. Munster, Edinburgh, call it.
I'm thinking Munster pick up a win here, 5 points, maybe a little bit more. You look at the quality Munster have available. You look at some of the guys coming back in. Maybe there's an issue with cohesion. Last time Munster played, I think Ronan mentioned it there earlier, they weren't very good. It was an incredibly forgettable game. But I think with the guys, the quality that are there, I think a good set piece, good line-out in particular against Edinburgh will go a long way to building pressure on these guys. And I think that the quality is there all through the team, really. So I'm looking at a Munster win by at least 5 points, a bonus point win, and Munster are within they're just a one game away, I would say, from getting a final place. So there's motivation there, and there's a pretty good squad selection too.
Ronan, you might be new to the podcast, but you're not getting away with sitting on the fence, so it's time to put your money where your mouth is.
No problem, no problem. I'd say Munster possibly by 10 points or less, as Tom says, around that area, between 5 and 10 points, I can see a Munster win. And much like Tom said, if Munster can kind of execute their own basics well, then we do have a fantastic chance here. I think if we don't give away too many silly penalties, it has kind of creeped in a little bit, perhaps, since Christmas especially. That's kind of like, you can't really afford to do that. That's going to dictate the play and to swing things in the opposition favour, where we really should just be on top and give them good territory. So I think if Munster can just be intelligent, execute their line out in scrum, then we have a fantastic chance, because some of the backs on the pitch are quite talented and our forwards are strong as well, as strong as I can remember us being during Six Nations. So yeah, I'd fancy Munster for this one.
Yeah, and I'll concur and go along with that as well. I think it is probably it's probably the most depth we've had in the squad, and I suppose, look, we know how, I think it's 3 seasons Johan van Graan is here now, 3 or 4, is it 4?
Yeah.
3
anyway.
Yeah, 3.5. Yeah, he came midway through a season. So, like, it just goes to show how slow a building process can take in rugby. It's not a soccer equivalent where a transfer window can sort out your business. It's very much more a long-term project in this sort of stuff. And speaking of long-term projects, Billy Holland, 240 caps, will mark his 240th cap at the weekend. Great servant from Munster Rugby, Tom, and still tipping away.
My God, look, he came into Munster Rugby around 2008, 2009 when he was in the academy, as far as I'm aware. 240 appearances is just serious work in the modern game, as tough and as physical as it is. When you look at the qualities that he has, he's a guy who would have trained and been in opposition to the likes of Paul O'Connell, Donegal Callaghan, Donegal Ryan, all the way along. Waited his turn to a certain extent. But the experience and just the quality that he brings. Look, he's a guy who knows what he is and he knows what he isn't. He knows he's not Eben Etzebeth. He knows he's a guy who's a very smart player, who's got a really good skill set for a guy who plays in the second row, and a fella who just always making good decisions. And you look at that and go, this is a guy who's just incredibly valuable at, 34, 35 years of age. This is the type of veteran that helps you through tough games like this. And 240 caps is just a massive, massive achievement for any player. And it's just really good to have seen the sort of the late renaissance of Billy Holland from around 2014, 2015 on, when he started to become more important in the squad, just to show what a good player he actually is. And just delighted for him, because it just shows the quality of player that he is.
Yeah, certainly is. Guys, we saw, I suppose, some of the reactions on social media through the week of the difference in the disciplinary sentences handed down to Peter O'Mahony and Xander Fagerson. Tom, just enlighten some of our listeners as to why the difference in the sentencing.
What people don't get about
QC Savage, I should say.
What they don't get about rugby disciplinary things is that for the most part, it is kind of seen as a legal process, rightly or wrongly. So when you get cited and brought into a situation like that, where you have to answer for what you've done, a guilty plea sometimes goes a long way to getting yourself a decent bit lopped off your suspension. Peter O'Mahony, when he went in, what was it, last week, basically said, yes, it was a red card. Held his hands up, whatever, grand job, got 3 weeks. Xander Fagerson, for a broadly similar offence, went in and disputed the fact that it was a red card, and as a result, the legal people involved gave him an extra week of suspension compared to O'Mahony, because he didn't accept that he committed a red card offence after they had adjudged it, that in their opinion, based on the laws, that it was a red card offence. Now, that can be frustrating for people to look at, because they're going, it's the same thing. He got 3 weeks, he got 4 weeks. But unless we start giving out flat bans, so if you get a red card for a shoulder to the face at a breakdown, it's 5 weeks regardless. Until there's a bit of context and mitigation, I think there's no easy answer to bans in rugby, because I think a hearing gives you an opportunity to go, okay, well, look, that maybe wasn't a proper red card. So maybe
if you're going to give the flat bans, then it kind of does away with the need for the disciplinary process, and that it's, hey, you got sent off, referee decided 5-match ban, there you go.
Yeah, so if the referee made a mistake, for example, or if there was a whole load of mitigation that maybe wasn't taken into account during the game, if there's no hearing, how is this decided? If it's just a flat ban, then look, you were red carded for a shoulder at the face of the breakdown, end of story. right or wrong, we have no way to judge that now. So you would look at it and go, it's frustrating. Look, it is frustrating to see two guys going in for pretty much the same thing and one guy getting a lower thing than the other for what seems like a fairly stupid reason. But outside of just giving flat bans for certain offences, it's just something I think we kind of have to live with, really.
Yeah, Ronan, you're taking it.
Yeah, I mean, as Tom said there, like that is the reason why it is a case with those two separate bands. But you know, I can completely understand people's reaction at the same time. Like, you know, they are looking at it, and people just do want clarity around these things because, of course, supporters of these teams do get frustrated in the first place when they see their players being sent off and matches being a small bit ruined by these red cards. At least then they do expect some kind of consistency and some concise ruling about the outcome in relation to it once it goes to a hearing. As Tom said, like that just is the case at the moment. It is just done on that basis of, you know, the player themselves and how they respond at the hearing. Whether that's right or wrong is questionable at this point. But again, context has to be taken into these situations. So at the end of the day, it does make sense. And had Ferguson just accepted his ban, then, you know, he wouldn't have had this issue.
That's the thing. Like, what are his legal people thinking? Like, just play.
Exactly.
It was a red card. Sorry, and just get your weeks and be done with it. I like, you know, it's just very safe.
In many ways, he's created his own problem in many ways. Like, so I suppose, you know, how sorry can you feel for him?
Yeah, I suppose. Look, it's just a case of, you know, take your medicine and get on with it. You know, whether you are remorseful or not. If you want to reduce your ban, it's not rocket science. Tom, tell us how good Harry Byrne is.
Harry Byrne is the good player. He is. But at the same time, he is 21. He hasn't really played a whole lot of significant minutes for Leinster yet. I mean, if there was a Champions Cup they will have a Champions Cup quarter final, I think it is, or round of 16, whatever actually happens with that coming up soon enough. And will he start that game for Leinster? No. He won't. Johnny Sexton will if he's fit, and if he's not, Ross Byrne probably will. But you look at the way that the build-up of interest in Harry Byrne is. Look, I get that there's a real interest going forward to get these young players into the Irish jersey and to sort of move on, you know, because I think we're in a position now where results aren't good, and they haven't really been good for, nearly coming up on 2 years now. So you start to look at guys like, you know, Murray and Sexton, who get rolled together because, you know, they play with each other so often. I think Ronan O'Gara said at the weekend, or just there yesterday in the paper, that like Murray's actually a good number of years younger than Johnny Sexton, but you kind of get
lumped in, yeah.
But he's what, 30, 31 years of age. Johnny's 30, closer to you and me there, Rap. But you look at like what these guys will do, and like Harry Byrne is a guy I think needs to be brought in given experience. But I think there's a bit of a rush and I think a bit of a gap in what we can realistically expect from a 21-year-old young fella who isn't a starter for his province. Now, you look at Matthew Jalabert, you look at Romain Ntamack, right? There's so many more clubs in France for these guys to get starting experience as being the guy for their club. In Ireland, we only have 4 teams. I mean, New Zealand have a system that's incredibly similar to ours, but they have 5 clubs, you know, and you know, the like fully professional, like in Super Rugby. So even then, that allows a little bit more minutes for guys. And you look at the provinces, like Johnny Sexton and Ross Byrne are currently ahead of Harry Byrne. So I mean, what would that say to Ross Byrne, who's coming in and training and doing relatively well for Ireland, that no, we're just going to put this dude in, you know?
More importantly, with the red shirt on, what would it say to the likes of Ben Healy, who has arguably got more game time, who probably has got more game time than Ross Byrne in let's say top flight games this year with regards to Pro 14, and who to me would be further along in his development than Harry Byrne.
I would say the same. You look at the minutes that Ben Healy has had against Scarlets rather, against Edinburgh at the start of the season. 2 big, you know, like pretty strong selections of both those teams, and he's played Champions Cup rugby. And you look at Harry Byrne hasn't had those minutes. He's had the sort of the C grade games, you know, and you look at that and go, okay, Ben Healy's a guy who I think is a good player and who needs that bit of extra time to develop to get to that level. I think sometimes that there can be a rush with a guy like Harry Byrne to look at him playing well, for example, against a Scarlets B team. Like, I mean, if you just call it what it is, I mean, it was a Scarlets B team with an incredibly strong Leinster team in context. You look at the caps around them, like Luke McGrath at 9, Dave Carney on the wing. They had starting Tess Lyon starting in the pack, a load of Irish internationals. You look at that and go, okay, they beat Scarlets fairly comprehensively, but you have to kind of put that into context as well. It won't always be as easy as that. We're looking at like a very, like we'll say, for example, on against France at the weekend. In context, that was a Leinster backline that could easily start a Champions Cup game. But you look at their ability to get around a French side of huge quality, and all of a sudden it's not really happening as easy as what it would at Pro 14 level. Like, you put that backline out, like, what was it? Jamison Gibson Park, Ross Byrne, Henshaw, Ringrose, Keenan Lowe, and whoever the other fellow was. I think Earls was there. But they brought on, who was the guy they brought on for Earls? Lar Moore. So you look at the way they finished the game and go, geez, that back line, God, if that was in a Pro 14 game, you'd back them to break down these guys fairly easily. But it didn't happen. And I think the levels between a guy really performing at Pro 14 level and even going up to a test level game against Italy, who Ireland would expect to beat more often than not, sure. But even the level change from there to there is something that would make any coach kind of go, okay, maybe we don't need to throw in a whole lot of these guys. I can make an argument for Harry Byrne being on the bench maybe and coming on and finishing off the game with Conor Murray or vice versa. But I think that we can put a little bit too much expectation on a young player who doesn't really have all that much experience as being a guy who there's a lot of, not just goal kicking, but like game plan responsibility on this guy. Yes, we need to develop young players, and I think there's a way to do that. But I think sometimes that there can be a bit too much hype with regards to a young fella that maybe when they don't live up to that, then where do we go from there? Like, where does the actual discussion on players go? Like, I mean, if Ross Byrne isn't starting for Ireland at the age of 22, does that mean he's done as a player? I don't think so. But it's just one of those things that, there's a lot of attention on the guy right now, and I think that he's probably in a better place right now starting against the Dragons tonight than what he would be if he was all of a sudden thrown in starting a test match out of nowhere.
Yeah, exactly. Like, it's a whole new game, really. Like, just you watched it against France, and Ireland's attack the last 2 weeks really hasn't really motored that well at all. Like, the backs kind of creatively haven't got that much space, and that's much to do with the kind of the talent they're up against versus the Pro 14. But also, like, with Leinster, like, their forward pack are going to be on top for 80 minutes, like, just giving the perfect ball, go forward momentum the whole time. And you come into international rugby, like, and you're playing against like a French pack with like Paul Williams in second row, and these kind of guys, it's a whole other ball game. Like, so it shouldn't really come as much as a surprise that, like, for Ireland, these Leinster guys, it's going to be that bit tougher. First of all, just getting the ball, it's not so much on the front foot, momentum isn't in their favour. Like, it's not like you're up against Scarlet's second team, who maybe after half an hour their heads are just down and you can run right and rack up points. You're going to be against international guys who are going to keep on fighting for every single yard. 80 minutes, a whole other story. And yeah, like, Leinster do have some quality backs, like, and there's no question, like, Ringrose and Henshaw, these guys are like top tier, will be in the Lion squad. But yeah, like, you just have to think, as much as they're good, if we're going to get anywhere, I think you're going to have more creative play, and more work has to be done by Mike Catt as well. I think just getting things motoring, because from what I've seen so far, like, it's just been pretty lateral from Ireland. And in the international stage, when you aren't winning up front comprehensively, then you do need that bit more of edge to drag you towards victories in the Six Nations.
Tom, you've taken some time away from tormenting Leinster fans this week to turn out some decent content on the Patreon page.
Yeah, I know it's been enjoyable, but this week I'm mainly going to be looking at what I did was I was looking at Ireland's attacking work against France. I did that this week in the gift room just looked at some of the pictures that were created, and where you look at the structure, how it worked. I basically had a look at some of our decision making at key moments and how that played into winning and losing against a team like France. And I'm also covering the Edinburgh game this week in the Red Eye, just having a look at where I think Munster can win that game and how. That's on patreon.com/3raykings.